Their idea is crazy. For a long time. I don't know. I like actually telling you especially with Python.
But it actually had a good search where you could search for text including line breaks.
Finding that
Right.
Can you wait about 15 minutes?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
If I come back and it's
Let me get rolling and then, another beer.
Would you like another one, sir?
Okay, so that was some food.
Sure. What can I get for you?
Can I get the chicken thing?
Sure. What kind of sauce would you like? We have buffalo barbecue, honey mustard, teriyaki, blue cheese, ranch, sweet Thai chili.
I hope this was time too. Something.
Okay, you do it okay on beer?
I'm kind of
You're gonna miss us. Oh yeah.
Where are you moving?
Virginia. Down in the suburbs.
Okay.
But we had hangouts. It's all, but you know what? Yeah, I mean, the last 3 I've done, ask him, my computer crashed. I don't know what the problem is. It's a POS, you know.
It was funny because there was like a frozen frame of you staring into your camera, and I was like connecting to it, like, come on, I see you, Pat.
I was
Come
locked
on.
up, and then it just like went, phew.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're talking about the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the other.
Well, no, I have a worse problem with Skype. I mean, Skype is a nightmare. Okay, I gotta see a nod. Yeah, it's not just me. Well, I think part of it's because we have a really, really bad data infrastructure in New Hampshire. If it rains, you get no internet. You know, I live a mile from the CO, and they tell me I can't get high-speed internet. I mean, come on, I'm a mile away.
The CO. Wow. You're dating yourself with that.
Well, no, my husband works in telecom. Okay, that's all I hear all the freaking time. I know more about telecom than PHP.
We're ready to go.
Sorry, after you, sir, yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you everybody for waiting. I appreciate the patience. I'm running a little late myself today, but we are live broadcasting today, which is a little bit different. I doubt anybody's caught the video, but if anybody is, welcome. Anyway, so how many of you, is this your first time here? How many of you saw Node.js? What the heck? This has nothing to do with PHP.
Answer your first question. This is not my first time here. This is my first time at a PHP meetup here.
Well, welcome to you and all the new people here today. You know, here we try not to be just about PHP. We try to be about the community, and Node is certainly part of the community. You know, both the web development community and the PHP community, as a lot of the PHP developers in here might at some point find Node to be a useful tool to be in their toolbox.
Hold on.
Andrew, how would somebody find to be online? I know Lisa wanted to come.
The YouTube channel for New Hampshire PHP.
It should also be on the NHPHP page on Google+.
So that's a decent segue into kind of the official business. My shameless plug, follow us on YouTube apparently. You know, LinkedIn, Twitter, and whatnot. As you can see, we're not always all about PHP, so even if you're not a PHP developer, it's all good. And also the obligatory thank you to our organizers, Pat, and also Mary, who is actually going to be leaving us. She's going to be moving too far away to drive to hang out with us every month. So thank you very much for helping out in the last year and a half and or longer, and we appreciate it, and thank you for, you know, without you guys it wouldn't be New Hampshire PHP definitely wouldn't be what it is today. So without farther ado, I'll get off the camera and pass over to Michael.
Thank you, Andrew. Are you guys okay if I sit? Do you care? Sit or stand? I think I'd rather sit. So my name is Michael Strickland. You can catch me on Twitter, Alabama Mike. Just to answer all your questions, yes, I am from Alabama. That's where the accent's from. I've lived in New Hampshire for almost 16 years now, and it's shameful, but this is my first time coming to a tech meetup in Manchester. So, and if you'd asked me, I would have never guessed it was going to be a PHP meetup for the first one. I don't do a whole lot of PHP coding. I've recently been doing a fair amount of PHP code reviews because I'm CTO for a software consultancy that's based in New York City. We get a lot of rescue projects, and we see an inordinate amount of rescue projects written in PHP by people in countries other than the United States, and that's as far as I'll take that comment. But that doesn't color my opinion of PHP. I think it's a wonderful language. It gets developers productive in short order, so I understand why people use it. That said, I've seen a lot of really ugly PHP projects lately. Anyways, jumping in, I really wanted this to be interactive, so if you happen to bring your machine with you, you can go to Node.js.org. There'll be a big green install button there. If you want to follow along with some of the exercises, feel free to go ahead and install it. So the first question we'll deal with is, what is Node.js? I assume you've heard of it. It's getting pretty popular now. I find that even people who don't do server-side JavaScript end up having to learn Node.js because it's showing up now in front-end toolkits. If you use Grunt or Gulp anywhere in your build process, you are using Node, whether you realized it or not. So what is Node? If you do some Googling, you'll see people saying, well, it's a platform, it's a framework, it's Chrome's JavaScript virtual machine, better known as V8, abstracted out. Those are all partially correct. The answer I like is it's a program written in C that gives you a runtime environment for JavaScript code. So if you know how to write JavaScript, this gives you an environment where you can create server-side behavior. And as the little diagram there shows, most of it is written in C. The bindings are written in JavaScript itself. Yeah, so that's roughly what Node is. Why in the world should you learn it? First, Node's very applicable for what's called DIRT apps. You guys heard about DIRT apps before? Data-intensive real-time applications. Things like streaming media, video conferencing, real-time chat. These are all places where Node excels. It was designed from the ground up to use asynchronous programming, has a very fast event loop. The virtual machine that's running the JavaScript code, V8, is really, really fast. Google spent a lot of money on it, and they have tests that prove that it's almost the same as programming in a systems language. So, you know, you can program in an interpretive language and get almost the same response as you would programming against the metal. JavaScript is pretty much ubiquitous now. I assume you guys, even though you're PHP developers, you get your hands in JavaScript because eventually you have to do some behavior on the client side. So I find that everybody, even if you didn't intend to write JavaScript, has written some JavaScript at this point. You can't get away from it. There's a lot of POS support for this. If you want to run applications written in Node, you'll find Azure supports it, Heroku supports it, Rackspace supports it, Google App Engine. Like, I'm not aware of any platform that doesn't support Node right now. Yeah. And the other reason is NPM. NPM is Node Package Manager. We'll talk more about it later. But basically, there's a huge community around Node that's probably written most of the code that you need to write yourself. You guys installed yet?
Yeah. I don't know if we have the bandwidth for that.
All right. Yeah, right. I was like, yeah, you know, that's enough slides. People will have it installed by now. Any questions so far? All right. Yeah, you know what? We'll come back to this then. Let's keep going. So what's different with Node from programming JavaScript in the browser? The first one's the biggest one. Obviously, there's no document object model that you're working with. I'd say 80% of the JavaScript code I've written is somehow integrated with window dot or document dot. In Node, there is no DOM. You're on the server side. I guess if you're doing something like writing a web scraper, you'll deal with the DOM, but for the most part, Node code doesn't really touch the document object model. Top level scope is different. I'm sure if you've written JavaScript, you realize var some name equals whatever is going to create an object that's going to include global namespace. It's going to be available everywhere. Node's not like that. Everything's modular in Node. Modules have a one-to-one relationship with files. So if you create a variable with no namespace, it's only going to be available within that module, within that file. If you need to scope it outside that, you'll use an export command. That brings into this notion common.js. You guys ever heard of common.js? It's a set of specifications written by a community that was trying to define what an environment for JavaScript would look like outside the browser. It got really popular, so popular that a group created a client-side version of that called Browserify. So if you want to use the same modular support that you have in Node, you can use that in the front end if you include Browserify. That gives you things like the require, keyword, local scoping, all that fun stuff. And the other thing that's really different is that modularity and dependency support. When you're using it in the browser without Browserify, it's kind of Wild West. Everything's kind of smashed together. You got to be careful about using namespaces if you want your code to remain clear. NPM. All right. So this is where I'm going to get myself into trouble because, like I said, I'm not a PHP developer, but I was looking for idioms that relate NPM to something you'd be familiar with, and most people on Stack Overflow say NPM is like Composer. Have you guys used Composer before? It's going up and down. All right.
We've had talks.
Okay, awesome. All right. So NPM is the Node package manager. It gives you both package and dependency management. It now is included with Node. Prior to like the latest version, you had to download it separately and install it. Again, there is a lot of developers writing NPM code. I don't know how many modules are out there now. It's in like the tens of thousands or something insane like that. But what I found is if I need to do something, like if I need a parser for some format, or if I need a driver to connect to some database, it's best if I do NPM search before I even think about going down the rabbit hole. Because, 99% of the time I find somebody's written the parser for that weird text format that my client wants, or the weird variant of Mongo that somebody's using already has support in there. So, before you dig in and start trying to write support for whatever you're doing, check on NPM first.
Are they reliable?
Yeah, so what I'd say there, go to, I think it's npmjs.com, and there's a search. Their nice little search engine shows you how many things depend on it, when the last time it was updated, all that. And it's just like any other package manager. Like, I try to use things that are like still maintained actively, have a fair amount of users on it.
Veggie burgers?
No problem. But caveat emptor, just like Ruby Gems was
Chicken tenders? Sweet chili?
chicken tenders.
California Club.
Just like Ruby Gems was hacked a few years ago. I don't know, guys, if you remember that, but basically somebody took over Ruby Gems surreptitiously and started putting malware inside of like some very well-known Ruby Gems. None of these package repositories are like completely secure, so be careful, right? Are you installed yet? All right, so if you want to, drop out of the command line.
Quick question, you say none of the packages are secure, so be careful. What would you say is the best route to handle that issue?
Well, first off, if you go check on Stack Overflow, like what I found is the community picks up on this stuff really quick. So I'd go over to Stack Overflow and I'd type in like npm hacked as a search or something like that, and most of the time you'll find it there. Or go look on Hacker News Marvel language. Was a really fast, and they never block the event loop. You know, write all your code. You've got a callback that handles an event, but whatever you do, don't write synchronous code that blocks the event loop because it's going to shit on everybody else that's trying to access your application. And I'm sure that you've been writing PHP for a while. You realize what happens when you've got that long-running database call or that long-running file system operation or whatever. You probably experienced the pain of writing synchronous code, so I don't have to preach at you about the benefits of async code. In Node, it's absolutely critical that any code you're using that runs inside the event loop doesn't block. So that's like the cardinal rule of Node events is don't block the event loop. Which brings us to the anti-pattern. What not to do. Don't use any method that has sync on the end of the name. I think that's something pretty smart they did with the API. They made all the synchronous method calls end with sync. So you can look through code real quick. You can do a find and replace. Get rid of everything that has sync on the end of it. When you do something like replace the synchronous call, you're going to end up with code that looks like this. If you look at that last line, you'll see that read file is taking both a file name and the name of a function. That function is the callback. So you know, here's our callback that's actually doing the work. Here it's not doing much work, but this is showing you the difference between a call that's using blocking synchronous programming you guys have done. So I decided I'd throw up a little glossary here. And actually, when I was preparing for this and doing some research in the PHP documentation, I found that it's just a function that has no name. That's it, that's all. There's nothing more special than that. A closure is a block of code, and I hate the name, but to execute that code wrapped in the environment. So it's a function or a method that has all the required variables needed to execute that method enclosed within it. I guess that's where they got the name closure. This is something going back to like the late 60s. It's a functional programming concept that came out of Lisp. I've always tried to avoid Lisp, but now that I live in the Boston sphere, I've found that avoiding Lisp and Emacs is like impossible. Have you found the same is true?
I like Lisp.
No, I'm a convert, all right? I'm a convert. I've been writing a lot of Clojure lately. Clojure with a J, not Clojure with an S.
Yeah.
Another unfortunate naming. It is a very practical Lisp, and I've actually converted over. I feel like I've gone to the dark side. I was a Vim guy.
Clojure script with Node is wonderful to scale on.
Very interesting. I've been flying my drone with Clojure's library called TurboShrimp, but that's a completely different story. Out of these other terms here, does everybody know what a callback is?
I've heard it callback now.
We're going to get to that in a moment. So callback is just a function that's called from another function. Typically, when you register for an event or you call an asynchronous function, you pass it another function. the function you pass in is the callback. It will get called back when that event executes or when the asynchronous method you called completes. Continuation passing style. This is the root of callback hill. All right. So there's a bunch of different ways to write callbacks. You'll see it here in a second. While embeds each function inside the function that's going to call it, so you end up with this funky looking nested code where it's like indented, also known as the pyramid of doom. The way you get out of callback hell is through using an API called promise. Right now there's like 4 different specs for promise. The most popular is then, and if you do a little searching around, you'll see it. Basically, what happens is when you're setting up an asynchronous in a pin.then and pass the function name into the .then. So this takes you away from having these nested function calls and lets you kind of stack it naturally. Yeah, if you're going to use Node.js callbacks, so I think this meme that I found is that it. Move on to something else. So how do you get out of callback hell? It's unfortunate that my formatting's all screwed up. This is an example of bad, quote unquote, bad asynchronous code. Step 1 is to make these functions not anonymous. You'll see that, right here, these are both anonymous functions because we've got a function with no name. We've got another function down here that has no name. Where is it? Actually, this one only has one. Anyways, the way you get out of it is start by naming your functions. So, here we've got the functions actually have names. And then secondly, stop nesting the function calls. So instead of having these nested together, we can extract them out and stack them above the code that calls it. So here we have this function form submit that's called from this document query down here. By the way, this is all client-side JavaScript, so this isn't strictly speaking Node, but it is a good example of how to avoid callback hill. Yeah, and if you're interested in promises, we're going to do a workshop on those at Node School. Not likely to be the first meetup because I'm trying to invite everyone, not just programmers, to this. People interested in programming, I want them to come and learn some JavaScript, learn some Node. I'd say promises and asynchronous code is at least an intermediate level topic, so I don't think we'll start there, but come along and we'll discuss it. Since you guys are web programmers on the server side, I thought it was important to mention Express. Express is a web framework that was inspired heavily from Sinatra. If you're doing Ruby programming, so very minimal. If you play around a little bit with full stack JavaScript, you'll see Express coming up in a couple of these stacks. On top of Express, and it was heavily influenced by Rails, which is kind of where they stole the name from. Generators, all that fun stuff. It has its own ORM layer called Waterline. If you're interested in doing full stack JavaScript, I recommend Sales. It's getting pretty robust now. I was doing a client project. We had a good experience with it. Yeah.
Most of the code
if you do electronic engineering in any country in the world, all the documentation is in English. You've got to learn English.
Except Germany.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody German in here?
No.
Okay. All right. So I worked on a project for BMW, and I was shocked when I read their code because all variable names were in German, and I found out from this project that like Germany has like invented new words in the last 50 years just to have an equivalent from English for a lot of technical terms. They've like invented their own. I really thought the French would do that because you know they love to like reinvent words so they don't have to speak any English. But no, the Germans are like way ahead of the French on this. It's a good question.
On the website of the Spanish Royal Academy, they can't exactly, have a link to a webmaster. They have administrador.
Mm-hmm.
They can't exactly say webmaster.
Right.
You know. Okay, great.
That's pretty big.
I'm trying to remember. Are you guys familiar with Quines? Okay, a Quine is a program that takes no input and outputs the program listing in a different language. Okay, and if you go to GitHub, there's a project called the 100 Coin Relay, where it starts in Ruby and it goes through 100 languages and ends up back in Ruby. And somewhere along the line there, they end up using the language that's all in Portuguese. So I know there is a language that's not in English. I experienced it there. Yeah, so that's kind of fun, playing with Quines and all that. Yeah, come to Node School. We'll talk about promises more. Play with Express. You guys are server side. You'll like that experience. Yeah, that's a great question, right? Thank you. So Node School is a free in-person set of workshops on these interactive programs. I actually installed that Learn You Node. That's one of the Node School. So the way if you go to nodeschool.io, all the different workshoppers that are available. Basically, it has these interactive programs that teach you concepts from Node. And actually, there's some concepts that are beyond Node, but contribute a new module that teaches people, I don't know, run. You could do that. On your own. The reason why I'm doing the chapter here is because I thought it made sense to bring people together and have some mentors that can support people who are new to the language. And actually, a few of the workshoppers are kind of difficult. I know I struggled doing the promises workshop the first time, so I thought having sit down, we're going to write code together and learn about JavaScript and Node. So quick review of what we've covered here. Node is, a JavaScript environment that exists outside the browser. It gets a lot cooler when you start including things with NPM. If you're looking for something to do after fire up Express and play around with that, you'll be able to write a very minimal web app in no time. I mean, we could have done a hello world here really quick. Anytime you're playing around in Node, stick with asynchronous code. You won't have a good time in production if you start writing blocking code, especially if your code blocks the event. That's not fun. Some more homework, look at promises. If you type in promises in CommonJS, you'll get a ton of that. And yeah, you're all welcome. Tell your friends, come to Node School. Right now, I'm tentatively looking at May 5th, which is a Tuesday night for our first event. Silvertech is sponsoring us, so we'll be up the road here at the Ash Street Schoolhouse. I'm providing pizza and drinks. The drinks will not be beer, so if you want a beer and pizza, bring your own beer. And yeah, I just want to close by thanking you, Pat, for reaching out to me. I was on the bus back from New York when I got your first message. And I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. And Andrew, thank you for starting this group. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the community. And if you're interested, let's connect and keep in touch. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, all the G+ and other fun social networks. I pretty much stick to Alabama Mike. Everybody like remembers that, especially when they hear me talk. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Any questions?
Can anybody learn me how to program in PHP?
I think you might have a few people around this room who might be able to help there.
Maybe I'll get back on.
Maybe at some point we'll have a meetup that's about PHP.
What do you say? There's your topic for next month. But that's like the one thing that I would say I have no expertise on this whatever.
If we want to,
then you do how to do online business right there.
The one thing I could say
using
about
OAuth and PHP.
login and authentication
Using OAuth
is you
and
probably
PHP.
usually
Or
don't
Right, no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
like login authentication.
I'm not volunteering for it. I'd make a mess of it, but
No, we have people.
I'm sure somebody in here is very well versed in using
Worst
OAuth.
case scenario, one of
A
Andrew's
dozen or
guys.
so PHP frameworks that'll do it, and a dozen or so Node frameworks that'll do it as well.
But, I mean, we've done security a few times, and that certainly covered, authenticating, securing passwords. I mean, it's not a difficult concept. When I went to design school,
You got a question?
Most of the four major
real world
frameworks
examples, kind of
are
like
pretty,
where did
pretty
you first
robust
find
and
your
well
task very
integrated.
useful, or like if you were bringing someone to a project, like where's a good example of like
Where did I first find Node.js useful?
Laravel.
I know it's a broad.
I remember I was doing an application that was a media management experience. So I needed to process a large amount of XML before it got into the Salesforce APIs. So we ran a Node app that would do schema validation on the records as they were coming in. And it worked really well because we had a lot of clients feeding the XML into the system, so the scalability of Node worked well. The fact that there was already like xQuery and all these other modules there in PM made it really easy. Like basically we're writing glue code together, and it cut down on like a lot of API calls to Salesforce, which I don't know if it's still the case, but at the time it was like really expensive to go over your limit, your API call limit. I think that was the first time I used it. Yeah.
So you kind of found like scalability and speed were kind of like the main things that.
Yeah, I'd say scalability was probably the most important. Scalability without having to dig into like concurrency issues, like having the single threaded event loop was pretty awesome. I don't like having to deal with blocks and all that. It's been an area that I've always tried to avoid.
So I think if anybody's interested and you can figure out how to increase the font size on your terminal, we probably do have time for Hello World.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah.
Is this where we were trying to get to?
Yeah, we can.
World exercise?
We can do that. We can also do like the standard hello world. So if you like, just type in note in the command line. You get.
It's the first.
He's like, yeah, I
There's two
got
different
it.
guest ones. It's the one's just a single guest.
Last time I had to enter the password was almost 2 years ago.
I know.
Var server equals.
It's a public network, so it's okay if they didn't change their password.
Can we do one or two more font sizes?
Yeah, it's a little small.
Oh, yeah. You might
That's
need to
good.
move the window over a little bit.
Thank you.
Right on.
Oh, good, I got the same error message.
It's not an error message, actually. That's the return
Oh, that's
value.
return, that's no return.
Right, no return value, right. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what the API for this is. I think it's response by the end.
Let me look up for it.
I'm gonna have to go back to my example here because I haven't written Hello World in a while. There we go. Res.writeHead to get the header back and res. Okay. Oh yeah. I hope you guys haven't been following along. All right, let's try it again.
So just to clarify, the HTTP is a library you're including, right?
That's right. It's like a standard library that comes with Node. Unlike PHP, where you need or Nginx or some other HTTP